Monopolies and the Sherman Antitrust Act, Making Change. Our goal for today's lesson is to learn about the Sherman Antitrust Act, what it was, and why it was necessary. Some questions this presentation will answer is what is a trust, what is a monopoly, why were they so bad and who supported or used them, who implemented this reform, and how it affects us now. Some key terms. Trust. A trust is when a stockholder from multiple companies share out parts of their companies known as shares to a select group of people known as trustees. The trustees take control of the company while stockholders receive an income off of the shared company's profit. Their share is cashed in using certificates. Trusts control the production and distribution of a product or service and limits competition. Monopoly. A monopoly is when one company has complete control over one industry and controls all of that product or service, including the pricing. Monopolies eliminate competition. Interstate commerce. The buying, selling, or distribution of a product or service. SOC, abbreviation for the Standard Oil Company. NSC, abbreviation for the Northern Securities Company. Note, trusts were often used to conceal monopolies. What is the Sherman Antitrust Act? The Sherman Antitrust Act was the first measure put in that prohibited against trusts. This act was based off of the constitutional power to regulate the shipment, distribution, and purchasing of a product or service. The part of the act that prohibits trust states, every contract or combination in restraint of trade or commerce among several states or with foreign nations is hereby declared to be illegal. The issue with monopolies and trusts. Monopolies would take over whole industries. Doing this eliminated the competition, put people out of jobs, drove prices up, and forced other companies to bankruptcy or into merging. Trusts would also take control of an industry, but instead of having one person be in charge, it was a group of people known as a board of trustees. Prominent monopolies and trusts were the Standard Oil Company, which was eventually turned into the Standard Oil Trust, run by J.D. Rockefeller, and the Northern Securities Company, run by James J. Hill, E.H. Harriman, and J.P. Morgan. Additional facts. Trusts hastened mergers and eliminated competition in an industry. The reason the state laws were not effective against the trust was because most operated across state lines, which was why the federal government got involved. This is further expanded upon in examples. Muckrakers and their views. Some important muckrakers or reformers to note are Ada Tarbell and Theodore Roosevelt. Some captains of industry, or in this case robber barons, would be J.D. Rockefeller, James J. Hill, and E.H. Harriman, and J.P. Morgan. A bit of background. As of now, the Sherman Antitrust Act was one of the first steps to ending trusts and, by correlation, monopolies, as it prevented trusts from being made in the first place. Trustbusters such as Theodore Roosevelt aimed to break up trusts and monopolies that he deemed bad, those not concerned with public welfare. Theodore Roosevelt played one of the major roles in disbanding of trusts and monopolies. In fact, he was the one to create the Sherman Antitrust Act in the first place. As a progressive president and trustbuster, he would investigate and fight monopolies formed to take control of an industry. J.D. Rockefeller was one of those in charge of a huge monopoly, the Standard Oil Company, along with James J. Hill, E.H. Harriman, and J.P. Morgan, who owned the Northern Securities Company. The SOC was dissolved in 1911 and the NSC in 1904. Both broken up by Theodore Roosevelt. Trusts and monopolies were used by robber barons or captains of industry who used trust as a way to eliminate all competition in their field of work so that they could control the industry and by default the income. Example. Some of the largest monopolies in U.S. history were the Standard Oil Company, owned by J.D. Rockefeller, and the Northern Securities Company, owned by James J. Hill, E.H. Harriman, and J.P. Morgan. By the 1900s, the SOC had expanded from its place in the east to regions further west to look for more oil. The SOC was known as the Mother Trust, and the antitrust movement was spreading exponentially at this time. Farmer organizations, labor unions, muckrakers, and progressive politicians were attacking sugar and tobacco trusts, along with their work against the SOC. Muckraker journalists pressed for federal action against the SOC as state lawsuits against it weren't having any effect. Ada Tarbell, a prominent muckraker journalist, published a carefully researched article detailing how John D. Rockefeller would ruthlessly force his competitors to sell or perish. She also recognized and identified railroad discounts, which were outlawed by the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, a key to the creation and success of the Standard Oil monopoly. Tarbell pushed for the government to investigate the trust, and Theodore Roosevelt got involved. Unlike Tarbell, who pressed to break up the trust, he did not want to disband it, only put a stop to their anti-competitive abuses. In 1906, November 18th, the trust was sued and filed under the Sherman Antitrust Act. A small activity and to check for understanding. Pause here and answer these 4 questions. The answers to them will be on the next slide. These are the answers for the activity on the previous slide. Thank you so much for listening.